Hey there, welcome to the Rooted Podcast. This is Rob Armstrong, and this is week 4 as we're reading through the Bible here at Harrisburg, and we're reading from Genesis 27 through Genesis 37. And as you're reading, you're going to come across a lot of different things and situations and circumstances that cause you to pause and think and to reflect. And as I was reading through, I could not help but reflect on just the reality of the waiting that Jacob goes through in his desire to marry Rachel. And so I wanted to talk some today and just kind of focus this episode on waiting and just to remind us that there are things that are really worth waiting for, and to just bring into light that waiting is a part of the Christian life. And I say that because our country doesn't have much of a culture of waiting. We are impatient. We want our food now. We want our movies now. We want our TV shows immediately. We don't want to wait for an episode. For instance, just using TV shows as an example. When you are trying to watch through maybe a season of a TV show, more and more Americans want the whole season at one time, and they just want to binge it for a weekend rather than wait for the next episode to come out from one week at a time. My children have no concept of what it is like really to wait for commercials, because so much of children's programming these days is through streaming services, and not because it comes on Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just always there, and they don't understand why sometimes we make them wait like we used to wait. There used to be a kind of a cultural waiting because it's what technology demanded, or it's what our circumstances demanded. And now we live in a world where waiting is often unacceptable. I mean, I was thinking the other day, someone was complaining about how long it took them to wait in line somewhere, and I think the total time they spent waiting was like 4 minutes. And all the time, I think back to sitting in places like waiting rooms where you didn't have phones to look at and social media to scroll through or something to pretend like you were busy. You sat in a room awkwardly with other people and tried not to make eye contact sometimes with someone, or maybe we're comfortable talking. I've kind of been comfortable talking in those situations, and you strike up a conversation and you meet someone and you get to know them. And then when you get home, you tell your family about this interesting person you met while you were waiting to get your oil changed. But now you go into those kind of places and there's TVs on and there's coffee available, and then everybody's got headphones in and they're sitting there and they're just doing something other than waiting. We need to have this sense of busy. And so I was struck with the heart of Jacob to wait 14 years to marry the woman that he loves, and couldn't help but think that in our world of today, waiting relationally is rare. But that as Christians, we have an understanding of waiting. We are born out of waiting, in the sense that God promised to send a Messiah, and with the whole earth groaning and waiting for him, Christ came, and now we are in a posture of waiting for Christ to return. And waiting is one of the ways that we trust. It's one of the ways that we exhibit our faith, is being a people who can wait. And so I wanted to talk some just about waiting, because I think it's relevant to our lives today. I think there are things that we need to be reminded of, and for instance, just thinking about, the thing that sparked waiting for me in this week's reading, the idea of waiting, was the relationship between Jacob and Rachel, and then to think for a moment that he would wait, and then to think about the fact that I waited in many ways for my wife. And there, I think about the blessing that we have in our relationship, the way God has helped us and to encourage us in our relationship. And then I think about conversations that I've had in the last maybe 4 to 10 years, and I think about stories that I hear from friends or from other people in ministry, or even and the stories are largely about a lack of waiting. I think about conversations that I have with people who want parts or all of a relationship without taking the time to develop the relationship or understanding God's plan for relationship. For instance, there is a lessening of difference between Christian dating relationships and non-Christian dating relationships across many places in our country. And what I mean by that is, especially sexually, there's kind conversations that I've listened to online, there's research that I've read in recent years, that many Christian couples just don't see a reason to follow God's design to wait sexually for marriage. And even in the last maybe month or so, someone shared a clip from a podcast that some church leaders in another part of the country had done, in which they talked about how they believed that by having a sexual relationship before they were married, that there were positives to that, and never seemed to acknowledge that it was sinful and that it was against the Lord's plans. Whatever practical reasons they may have come up with to say that that was good, if the Lord has said it isn't good, then it isn't good. And so when in thinking about waiting and relationships as Christians, we believe in waiting in so many ways. But we think about waiting in our relationships as Christians, or in life as Christians. We think about waiting because it matters why we're waiting. When God tells us to wait sexually before we are married, it is because our relationship with one another in marriage is displaying a purity of covenant and relationship that is meant to be an illustration, or to tell the story, or to make visible the story of God's relationship with us and how he calls us to be holy and completely dedicated to him, and to not give ourselves to idols. There's a way in which the Bible speaks of us giving ourselves to idols in the same way that it would talk about us giving ourselves to a prostitute or a sexual relationship with someone that we're not married to. And God has even spoken of our idolatry and our rebellion in terms of adultery. And so when we think about how significant waiting is, we have to remember why we're waiting. It's important to wait on the Lord. It is important to wait for the things he's told us to wait for, and to wait in the ways that he has told us to wait, because our waiting is an expression of devotion to him, of commitment to him, that's really ultimately an expression of our faith and our trust in him. And so is it worth waiting to date a Christian? Absolutely. I at this point in my life, with children who are getting into the ages that they are, and walking with friends and their children's dating relationships, man, I would just say to those who would say, does it really matter that I wait until there's a Christian in front of me who loves Jesus? I would say the way you do, or hopefully more than you do. Is it worth waiting? I would say you should wait. Like the Bible tells us not to be unequally yoked or in relationship with unbelievers. And so you shouldn't be dating someone that doesn't know the Lord. It doesn't matter if you're divorced and dating. It doesn't matter if you're never married and in your 30s and dating. If you're never married and in your 30s and dating, it doesn't matter if you're 15 and 16 and your parents have given you permission to date. When it comes to waiting, one of the ways we should wait relationally is we should wait. And if we're going to have dating relationships, we should have them with someone who wants to have the same kind of relationship based on their relationship with Christ that we do. So yeah, to the high schooler, to the college student, to the young single adult, to the potentially newly single, or even widowed or widowed single, yeah, you should wait to date someone and be in that kind of relationship with someone who's a believer and who wants the same things out of that relationship and for the same reasons that you do. In a dating relationship, is it really important? Does it really matter if you wait in your sexual relationship? Absolutely it does. I think Christianity is filled with people with regrets. I counsel with people over things that they've done, things that they wish they had never done, things that they did with other people. And it would be a normal experience for a Christian who went outside the boundaries of God's design for us sexually in dating relationships to have regrets. And praise the Lord, we have grace, and that he is good, and that he forgives us, and that he even helps us to have something wonderful and great, that he allows us to be pure with an individual once we're married. But what I would say is, having listened to so many individuals who wish they had just followed the Lord on the other side of going outside of his plan, that they wish they would have followed his plan and maybe even backed it up further than some people would have thought, to be pure and to be holy in his eyes, to be able to say to their spouse, I have waited for you so that we can, in our relationship with each other, be the way God would have his bride to be with him. We waited for you. We have been only for you. And that's God's design for us. And so in a dating relationship, regardless of age, regardless of previous experiences, absolutely, waiting is important. It demonstrates where your true satisfaction comes from. It demonstrates that Christ is enough for you and that you can love the person in front of you and be in a relationship with the person in front of you, and that you can wait and trust the Lord. And now I do often tell couples once they get engaged, let's not wait a whole lot longer. I mean, you're young and you're engaged, and I tell couples all the time, don't do these 18-month engagements. Just get married. I know moms and dads don't always like that, and every now and then the parents hear me say that out loud, and they look at me like, no, we have this huge plan. And I'm like, but why wait 2 years? They love each other. They've got jobs. Let's get married and let's do Christian life. And you can have a big party whenever. And so, but there are all kinds of people around you, if you're a single Christian and you're dating, who are going to tell you it's okay. Those were antiquated rules. Those were for times of then, and things are different now. And they're not different in those ways now. So absolutely, if you're in a dating relationship and you're a believer and you're dating a believer, purity matters, because your purity in your sexual relationship with someone is completely connected to your relationship and your purity with the Lord. And so that's why it matters. Now, what about just waiting in general? Why is it even, you might find yourself asking, I hear it sometimes, and I think it maybe more than I hear it, is why do God's plans often involve so much waiting? Why would God have something for us, have a plan for us, have a design for us, and then put it far out in the distance? Like, what would the reasons for that be? And so some of the things that I would maybe point out when it comes to waiting is, one, what you're waiting for in life rarely involves just you. You have family, friends, relationships, coworkers, neighbors, people. We really don't live in isolation. We are doing relationship with other people. And so you have to take into consideration the fact that whatever God is doing in your life, it is connected to what he is doing everywhere else. And it's connected to what he did in generations before, and it's a part of what he's going to be doing in the generations that come after. And so, one, it doesn't involve you. Two, it's not about you. Like as Christians, one of our real core tenets of life is that life isn't about us. Our lives are about the Lord, and the goal of our lives would be him and his name continuing on, people knowing how wonderful he is and know his love and his goodness. And so when God is unfolding his plans for your life, they're his plans for your life, and they have purpose and they have meaning that extends way, way beyond you. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care about you. It just means that as Christians, we live with the awareness that what God is doing in our lives is a part of his plan. And so it's not just about us in our relationships with other people, and it's not even about us. It's about him and what he's doing. And that means the third thing is that it's for you. Like, there are reasons that God has for waiting. For instance, I don't know that my wife would have wanted to hang out with me before we met. Like, there were things the Lord needed to do in my life. There were ways that he needed to grow me and to mature me. There were things that I needed to hand over to him. There were dreams and desires and identity as a young man that I needed to hand over to him. I think to be someone as mature and as Christ-centered and as wonderful as my wife is and was when I met her, for her to have a desire to spend time with me. I mean, I was like many men. I just think there were things that I needed to grow and to mature in. And so I would pray and I would yearn, and I wanted a future. I wanted a life, and I wanted God to do certain things and to put certain things in place in my life. And I'm thankful that he had me ready for her when we met. And that she was at a place where she was open to a relationship with a guy like me. when she met me, and that we were able to talk about our lives and God's plan and ministry and missions and how God would work through us in our relationships together, and how we could see Him working and leading and guiding. And if there had not been waiting, if there had not been a space in my life for that, then I don't know that I've been able to talk about all the ways God had been working in my life up until that point. And so one of the things that's happening in our waiting is God is working in our lives. He has refining work that He does in us. He has a maturing work that He does in us. And He's also, in what He's doing in you, He is also, I think more often than not, doing it in a way and for a reason that involves the way He's going to use you as well in someone else's life. And I can testify from my front row seat in spiritual lives as a pastor how often God uses someone's waiting for the good of someone who's watching them wait. And whether that's your children watching you as you wait for the Lord to answer a prayer that they hear you guys praying, at your dinner table and in the evenings as a family, whether that's your friends watching you as you wait for a believer to date, whether that's people watching you wait on the Lord to tell you what the next thing for you to do in your life is. And when we are waiting, God intends for us to continue to be faithful to Him, and not to be in like a, if you give me what I'm asking for, Lord, then I'll keep being faithful relationship, not in that kind of exchanging things with Him. But He has promised wonderful and good plans for us. And while we are praying for those things to happen and praying for Him to lead us and to help us to know what we should or shouldn't do, He also calls us to be faithful in the midst of that. And it is our faithfulness in those times of waiting that I find God grows us in our maturity, but He also, front row seat to people's spiritual lives, I see Him so often using your faithfulness while waiting to impact someone else's life, to encourage them, to strengthen them, to help them, often even to inspire or to motivate them. And so when you're reading through Scripture this week, I would encourage you to let yourself reflect. We talk through our Rooted journals here at Harrisburg about how we want to read a passage, we want to make sure we understand the passage, and then we want to take some space, and we really want to just think about it and pray about it. And I was doing that, and in just these first parts of our week's reading with just Jacob, and found myself going all kinds of places with waiting. And so I'd encourage you to do the same. It's been a longer podcast than we've been doing, but I do hope the thoughts about waiting are important. Parents, if you've got kids, teach them to wait. Teach them the importance of waiting. And as Christians, let's not lose sight that we are a people of waiting, but our waiting is a faithful waiting, and we will continue to be faithful to the Lord until Christ returns. Well, listen, this has been our Rooted in the Word podcast. It's been good to spend this time with you, and I will see you next time.